Start with our Newsy Tonight focus. The growing movement around a young former semi-driver imprisoned in Colorado. Tonight, several families are preparing to celebrate the holiday without someone they love after this. You may remember, April 25th, 2019, just west of Denver, Colorado, a semi-truck slammed into a group of cars stuck in traffic. The wreck triggered a fire, a more than 24 car pileup. 4 people died in that accident. The driver behind the wheel of the semi survived. His brakes failed while he was on the interstate. Raul Aguilera-Mederos now sits in a Colorado prison. A jury in October found him guilty on 27 counts, vehicular homicide, among other charges. And earlier this month, a judge sentenced him to 110 years in prison. That is the minimum available on all of those counts. The 26-year-old's family is now calling for Colorado's governor to change it.
I want everybody to understand it was an accident. He don't have no drugs in his system. He don't have no alcohol. He never drink. He don't even have a parking ticket. Thank you.
Calls for clemency and changes to Colorado law are growing louder. There's Aguilera-Mederos' family, 5 million signatures on an online petition, and now Kim Kardashian West, who has advocated for changes to the criminal justice system. She tweeted, quote, "Colorado law really has to be changed, and this is so unfair," adding the judge didn't want to sentence him to such a lengthy sentence. However, because of the mandatory minimums in Colorado, his hands were tied. And now a Colorado district attorney is asking a judge to reconsider that sentence. Meghan Lopez explains the Colorado law at the center of that decision.
It was an unforgettable tragedy, the crash on I-70 on April 25th, 2019. 4 lives lost, 4 families left without a loved one, many others injured. It's important to keep them in mind as we talk about the sentencing of Rogel Aguilera-Mederos, the inexperienced truck driver behind that tragedy. He was handed 110 years in prison.
Once you have 23 felonies with mandatory minimums that are served consecutively, that can quickly add up.
DU law professor Ian Farrell says Colorado has mandatory minimum rules and sentence enhancers that are more extreme than other states.
No discretion on a minimum sentence.
I think that this length of sentence for this particular defendant is vastly disproportionate.
That sentence inspired a Change.org petition that's garnered more than 3.1 million signatures. On social media, a call for truckers to boycott Colorado until Aguilera-Mederos is released or the law is changed.
I'm not seeing really anything that's showing up so much in that boycott.
That's Greg Fulton from the Colorado Motor Carriers Association. They spent a lot of time this week trying to clear up misinformation.
The petition which was out there seems to indicate that he was not responsible for this. And unfortunately, the facts don't seem to support that.
Instead, he says it was the driver's fault that the brakes overheated. He also doesn't give credence to a video that's quickly being reshared on social media of an alleged boycott.
It looked like it may have been from a different time.
He believes that's a highway closure. Fulton says 110 years seems too stiff, but the driver was at fault, so he doesn't think a pardon or commutation are appropriate.
I think it's important that, as an industry, we take responsibility.
Instead, maybe eventually, he says the sentence could be reevaluated. As for Farrell, he says some of Colorado's laws could, maybe even should, change.
To abolish the consecutive, or at least alter the consecutive sentencing rules.
But again, none of this makes what happened in 2019 any less of a tragedy for the people who died, the people affected, and even that truck driver.
Meghan Lopez joins us now from Denver. She's been following this story very closely. Meghan, good to see you. The DA is going to ask the state to reconsider here. Is there any reason to think that this is going to yield anything different?
There certainly is a reason, I would say. There's a lot of different reasons for that, but mainly it's the public outcry and also the bombshell really from the sentencing hearing that happened last week in the courtroom was you had the judge say that this is not the sentence that he would have imposed if he had discretion. Now, it's interesting because the reason that he had that sentence imposed was because of Colorado's laws when it comes to sentence enhancers and also our mandatory minimum sentences. But there is reason reason to believe that he could see a lower penalty as a result of this. So what the DA from Jefferson County asked for was something called an expedited resentencing. Usually it takes about 3 months after the original sentence for the judge to go ahead and maybe consider a resentencing hearing. This is an expedited one, and they said, and it's the legal term, but it's called unique and extraordinary circumstances, and that really gives the judge a lot more leeway to really look at the case and determine whether the sentence is fair and how he would change things if he were to change things. I spoke to some lawyers today, and they told me he could be facing as little as maybe probation or even some time served as a result of this, depending really on what the judge determines. Now, the interesting thing that you really have to keep in mind with a case like this is that it's tragic all the way around, and we don't want to forget the victims and their families. There were 4 people who were killed in this car accident, multiple others who were injured. And so the question really becomes, what is justice and what is fair for those families, but also what is fair in terms of a punishment and in terms of rehabilitation for Aguilera-Mederos, the defendant. And that's really the question that's going to be put in the judge's hands to determine. I was at a rally yesterday where there were a bunch of different people speaking on his behalf, some Latino organizations, some lawmakers, a lot of people that are really interested in this case. The defense attorneys are pushing for him to be released almost immediately from prison, but the families obviously are going to want a little bit more than that. A press release that the district attorney sent us last night, I believe, said that she's going to be speaking with those families and trying to really determine what they can be okay with. But ultimately, it's the judge that's going to have to decide what's fair and what's just for both the victims and the defendant.
Megan, it's such a good point about the victims, and really important to keep them in mind in all this. I want to bring into this conversation Raul Reyes. He's an attorney with a lot of experience, an immigration attorney in particular, but I know, Raul, that you have a lot you can speak to here. There's a lot of lingering questions, and in looking at the law and the options in front of Aguilera-Mederos, do you see a good chance of changing his sentence?
Well, as things stand right now, Mr. Mederos does probably, most likely I would say, have a good chance at having his sentence altered. I don't know about a pardon, but definitely altered, because it has generated national outrage. You've had LULAC, which is one of the largest and oldest Latino civil rights groups in the country, speaking out on his behalf. There's been, I know there's been different rallies in Colorado, and even celebrities like Kim Kardashian West coming forward to highlight this issue. So in that sense, because of all of this public pressure, yes, he has a good chance. However, he will still do jail time, because under Colorado law, before a sentence can be commuted or adjusted in any way, the defendant must serve, I believe it's a minimum of 120 days in prison. So his future may look better than the sentence suggests. But this is a very, very rare case, because of the sentence was so disproportionate to the tragedy that it has generated all of this protest. And I do know that Colorado State, they have a state sentencing reform commission. They have said that they're going to look into this matter.
Megan, what have we heard from Governor Jared Polis on this? Some really big names are invoking his name directly in some appeals, including Kim Kardashian. Has he said anything?
He has not said anything publicly other than sending us statements and saying that he will, just like he does with every case of application for clemency or for a pardon, he will take the facts into consideration and he will look at it. We do know that a Latino group known as LULAC met with the governor behind closed doors yesterday. Cameras were not invited in, and they made their case to the governor for Rogel Aguilera-Mederos to get either clemency or a pardon or time served. And they said that the meeting was very productive. They said that the governor seemed very receptive, but we really haven't heard from the governor in terms of any concrete actions that he wants to take. The one thing I would point you back to, though, is that we heard from that group at the rally yesterday saying that it doesn't really matter what the court does. They're going to continue to push for not only sentencing reforms here in Colorado, because they say that they're very necessary for felonies, but they're going to push for Aguilera-Mederos to be completely released from prison. And so if the judge in this case doesn't give him the time that they think is fair, that they're going to continue this application for clemency and these pushes and calls on the governor. But I can tell you that this is a case that started here in Denver and started, on a very micro level in terms of a terrible tragedy, and is now spread not only countrywide. I mean, you mentioned Kim Kardashian, but we're also hearing about international news outlets that are picking this up. I mean, there's just a lot of people that are very interested in this case and very interested in Colorado's sentencing laws.
Hey, Raul, is Colorado an outlier here? I mean, do we have a bigger problem with sentences like this across the country, or are we looking at kind of a unicorn?
Right. No, not a unicorn at all. The sad thing is that Colorado is not an outlier. I mean, we have these mandatory minimum sentencing laws at the federal level, and most states have them. And the problem with that, there's three real problems I can tell you real quick with these mandatory minimum sentencing. One is the most obvious. They take the power to hand out a sentence away from the judge and give it basically to the prosecutors. And so that's sort of something I don't think most Americans realize, how automatic these penalties are. Second, there is no evidence, whether you're looking at the state level or at the federal level, there's no evidence that these these huge sentences have any type of disproportionate effect on crimes. In fact, in Florida, after they enacted their mandatory sentences, in Florida, the crime rate actually rose. And the third reason why these types of sentences are so troubling is that they tend to disproportionately affect people of colors. For example, Latinos are 19% of the American population, but Latinos are 40% of the people affected by these mandatory minimum sentences. So they disproportionately harm people of color, and that sort of furthers the inequity that's already in our system of mass incarceration.
I mean, it's just incredible to think about the timeline here. You say what you will about who bears responsibility. More than 100 years is just incredible to think about for someone who's still in their 20s right now and who admittedly said they were just terrified when this happened. I'm wondering, Raul, from your perspective, what other parties may need to pay a legal consequence here, or if there is sort of liability on the part of more than just the driver here.
Well, I do want to make clear, because, this case has received national attention, but just in terms of the details, I did want to make clear that this driver was a lawful permanent resident. He had no trouble with he's a green card holder. He had no questions about his immigration status. There was no DUI. He was not drinking under the influence. He basically made a mistake. It was an accident. And under this sentence, the earliest he could be out for parole, he would probably be in his 70s or 80s, because this is a 26-year-old man, and the crime happened when the accident happened, when he was 23. So, I mean, that's the reality that we're looking at right now. It's as long as the system is in place, the piecemeal efforts like a potential pardon or potential commutation are not going to make the broader problem go away. And the thing is, our Attorney General, Merrick Garland, has said he's against these mandatory minimum sentencing laws, and Joe Biden has said the same thing as well. But so far, we haven't seen significant movement here. What I can tell you as an attorney not working on his case, in terms of potential liability, I think there could be some examination of the company that hired Mr. Mederos. Was he properly trained for extreme weather? Was he completely and highly proficient in English in order to understand the safety regulations or some of the possible hazardous, warnings and regulations that he had to deal with? I would think those are possible areas of interest in terms of liability. But basically, this was an accident. This is a disproportionate sentence, and it really just speaks to this overwhelming problem we have in the country of mass incarceration disproportionately affecting people of color.
And to think, too, about, what do you do when your brakes go out? That kind of training is so important.
Right.
We heard testimony from drivers who said that's not always something they're trained on. And, I'm thinking about being 23, and it's like you're still trying to figure out how to be an adult. And I know, to Megan's point, that you got to think about the victims here, too. And people died in this accident. And certainly when you're a truck driver, your actions can have deadly consequences. But certainly there's a conversation, too, to have about what happens when we're human and we make mistakes like this, even if they do cost lives.
Sure.
Raul Reyes, Meghan Lopez, I have to leave it there, but I appreciate you both so much. Thank you for your perspective.
Thank you.